Here is let's look at this clip of Elizabeth Warren, who is going on Bloomberg and talking about her brand. And I'm curious.
I'm sorry. Do you remember Bloomberg's book title? Speaking of good book titles, it was really good. Any guesses?
The bloom is off the rose.
Let 1,000 flowers bloom.
Oh God, no! It was Bloomberg on Bloomberg.
Oh.
It's
good.
really
That's good.
That's him.
They rejected Bloomberg as that was the working title. Here's Elizabeth Warren talking about taxation on, I think this was on Bloomberg, and it's interesting. Well, let's play this clip first.
Capitalism without rules is theft. Encouraging companies to build their business models on cheating people, that's not capitalism. That's not competition in the marketplace. That's not producing consumer surplus. So what I believe is capitalism with serious rules. And that means rules where everybody gets a chance to play.
The surplus is the theft.
Well, all right. So let me just ask you the Bernie Sanders, obviously running on, or at least his pedigree, right, is democratic socialism.
Yeah.
You know, hers is a reformation of capitalism. That said, she's suggested that the government sees the means of production when it comes to generic drugs. Her proposals, how much at the end of the day do you think their proposals land differently from each other, and how relevant is that difference?
I don't know, because she's been throwing up a lot of stuff in the past few weeks now, and I mean, the legislative proposals from Democratic senators have all been for show for the past few years now. That being said, you know, I'm excited by some of the things that she's proposed. For instance, opening up corporate boards and having labor representation on them, which would actually, I think, be a sea change in the way that American capitalism works. The thing about Warren is, in contrast to the other reformist candidates, she's the only one who seems actually reformist. She actually seems to believe what she says. She seems to actually position herself in opposition to the interests of capital, which is not something we've seen from any Democratic nominee for a long time now. So that being said, as far as the left goes, Warren is a perfectly acceptable candidate.
I guess it depends how much it matters to you, how much you think the rhetoric matters, right? Because there are people who would support Bernie over Warren, people on the socialist left, because Bernie is coming from a place of democratic socialism, structural reform, critique of capitalism, yada, yada. I think he's more of a social democrat than any kind of anti-capitalist, but whatever. Whereas Elizabeth Warren is coming from a place of reforming capitalism. So the outcomes might look relatively similar, but it just matters if you care that people are hearing those words, you know?
I'm very glad with what Warren's doing. And if he doesn't run, I'm happy to push my support over. But I mean, I think there are these subtle differences that do matter in terms of how you frame. I'm less worried about the words, but I'm like, to me, there is also just some unmovable facts here that, like, because she opted not to run in 2016, where maybe she could have very well actually defeated Hillary Clinton, which would have been incredible. But it's like Bernie did it. And Bernie has an entire. I mean,
all right. Well, I don't want to get. I want to stay on this. I want to stay on this point, though. I don't want to get in. I just want to stay specifically on this point. You know, whether he deserves it or not.
I'm not talking about deserves. He's the most popular politician in America.
I don't. That's not what I'm talking about. I want to talk about, like, in terms of, at the end of the day, is she going to be able to even go further in terms of her reformation proposals than Bernie? Because she is making it like it's reforming capitalism, as opposed to, rhetorically speaking, I want to replace the system.
Oh, capital does not care about that.
Right.
I mean, I couldn't tell you. I have absolutely no idea what the next thing Liz Warren is going to say. I mean, that being said, I mean, is she going to, roll out, I propose the nationalization of every major industry.
Right.
And it's just sort of something we all accept that she believes now.
Well, who would be the constituency that would speak? Because in terms of the base, they don't care, and in terms of the elites, they don't
If
care.
Bernie
So who would that
Sanders
speak
came
to?
out with, we should have the government make generic drugs,
Right.
I feel like there would be people's hair would go
From
on
who?
fire. I think from I think we're going to hear that from other candidates. I think we could hear that from a Kamala Harris conceivably, or
Conceivably, but I mean, at some point, they're all going to critique each other's proposals. But in terms of the voting public, and then of course, like Wall Street doesn't care either way. Who in like an actual mass body of voters would that make any difference with?
Well, I don't know that anybody's proposals or any of the rhetoric will make a big difference with anybody. But I'm just saying that the question is that can Elizabeth Warren go further under the guise of capitalist reform than Bernie Sanders can go because he is labeled as a socialist?
I guess we'll see.
Well, okay. That we could have wrapped this up 2.5 hours ago.
I don't know. I don't know. I don't see that.
Like, she is more acceptable to the mainstream of the Democratic Party. And I think that is something that will help her in the primary, if not in the general.
Okay. And so if that's the case, is there a substantive difference, not rhetorical, not pedigree, just I want to isolate it this is what I'm trying to get at, a substantive difference in terms of their proposals at this point? And to the extent that there is, are hers, and I would say, putting aside foreign policy, because I think that it clearly...
Can you, though?
But,
I don't think you can.
for the course of the conversation, we can.
I want to answer this in two ways. First, neither person has announced that they're running for president.
Correct.
Right now. There's no...
Warren has announced that she's going to announce on the 9th.
Right.
She'll do it. Certainly.
But there's no, kind of two-column comparison that we can make right now and then, take a microscope and say, oh, well, this one's actually more left than that other one. What we do know about the two candidates is that Bernie Sanders has never been a Democrat in his life. He is, despite currently being in the Democratic Senate leadership, he is a socialist, proclaims a socialist, and ostensibly this means he wants to be a part of a burgeoning socialist movement in the country that can operate as a political force. Liz Warren, of course, says she's a capitalist, but I believe also she's very serious about reform and government intervention there, and perhaps even challenging the power of capital. No great authority than Jonathan Chait actually pointed this out and was 100% correct when he said that socialists view the Democratic Party not as partners or something that they want to build, but as a marriage of convenience.
Right.
And with liberals and with, sadly, quite a lot of conservatives in that party. I believe that one priority right now, and that socialists have the best opportunity to do this, is to take over the Democratic Party and to clean house. And that means getting rid of that right flank and getting rid of the influence of capital within the party. And that goes back to my earlier point about challenging the power of health insurance companies and not having any Democrats take money from health insurance companies and pharmaceutical companies and defense contractors and Wall Street and so on and so
maybe
forth.
part of it then is how you're measuring the power of the bully pulpit. Like, maybe part of my bias is that, part of how I don't see the question working for me is I just think that where it does matter rhetorically is that his baseline of that kind of fundamental challenge already puts the goalposts so far in a different left direction that's a parameter resetter in and of itself, and we'll see whether or not it works. But I don't,
Yeah, and I also object to divorcing it from foreign policy, because really you can't. If you're going to have like a regulated capitalism and welfare state in one country, someone has to pay for that, right? And it's going to be paid for by imperial plunder. Like a socialist vision is a vision that has to extend to the whole world. And we've seen Bernie taking some very positive steps
Yeah.
in the right direction to form that like progressive international
Yes.
with Yanis Varoufakis.
And Warren actually does have, she put out a decent liberal foreign policy manifesto, but it's very interesting because it parallels like, essentially we should get back to almost like JFK stuff in the early 60s, which is like, don't be such a dick and help people develop and have some fair trade agreements. But when you don't talk about global oligarchy, when you don't talk about Lula, when you don't talk about restoring the Iran deal, you're leaving so much on the table.
And this certainly matters when we're talking about something like a Green New Deal, which thankfully we are talking about now. Mike Bloomberg says he's going to announce his Green New Deal plan. AOC is going to announce her Green New Deal plan. But
I'm
the thing
going
is,
to
I
pass
actually
the
don't.
money on everyone.
But the thing is, I don't. I obviously don't like Bloomberg, and if he were the Democratic nominee, I would probably be opposed to him, I'd have to say. That being said, I'm very curious what's in his Green New Deal, because just from reading some of his past statements, the outline of it sounds like something that, a lot of people could get behind.
Environmentally, I have a feeling he'll be very strong.
We have
He'll
to
be good.
We have to transition away from a carbon-based economy, and that has to be matched with replacing those jobs that are lost and economic investment in places like West Virginia. Okay, the outline of that sounds good. Even if we were going to avoid the question of how do you pay for it, without any sort of wealth transfers, which Bloomberg is opposed to. The thing is, we're just talking about a Green New Deal in domestically as a way to eliminate our emissions, which is possible. It's very feasible. We have the capital, we have the labor, we have know-how, and we have the material inputs to do that. If we were the only country that does that, that does absolutely nothing.
Right.
So
Whatsoever.
Giannis is campaigning on a Green New Deal across Europe right now, and he's coordinating with Bernie. So that also adds to the answer. And I would just say,
Here's my Green New Deal. I'm going to buy China. I'm
I make an initial public offer to China to buy all of them.
Buy China.
And that's a good example. Europe's been reducing emissions for the past 2 decades. Several European countries are emissions neutral, and that has done nothing.
That's exactly right. And also, not only that, I mean, I think as far as Bloomberg's green policies, environmental policies go, and again, I don't mean this all critically at all, but just look at what Jerry Brown's done in California. Actually, on the transition and tech side, he's done some really good things. But if you have a concept, but on the drill and supply side, he hasn't, and I doubt Bloomberg would either. And if you also conceive of the environment as being connected to people's needs and things like environmental justice and other things that would be part of an AOC vision, Jerry Brown's not been particularly good. So I mean, there's look, if the choice is Trump, or Jerry Brown or Bloomberg, you pick Jerry Brown or Bloomberg, but we're trying to put forth something different here.
And I would say that my starting position in terms of Green New Deal or any sort of policy, which again is this protean concept right now, would be the seizure of every energy company in the country.
Right.
That has to be it. And you
Hell
need
yeah.
to use their capital that they've accumulated destroying the planet for the past century in order to repair the planet.
And if
I
Warren comes out
prefer
tomorrow and says, "I will,"
nationalization, I just think seizure just seems a little bit abrupt. I
And
think
if
nationalization just sounds a lot more.
And if
sort of-
That's
And I
just
love to
revealing
see it.
your-
And when the right wing got very scared, or I guess they're still scared of it right now, that Trump is going to sign this executive order and he's going to do that, which is going to make a
National
unilateral
emergency.
capital outlay, and we're going to seize land at the border. What's going to prevent a
Absolutely.
socialist Democrat president from signing executive order day one, saying, "Well, it's an actual climate emergency, as we all know at this point. We're going to seize the assets
We're going to start with
of
the
every-
refineries, and then we'll
every
just work our
single
way backwards.
energy
Yes.
company,
If
and
Warren-
we're going to redirect those resources." And I think that has to happen. That would be great.
The most fun candidate would be someone like Tony Blair or Bill Clinton or Kamala Harris explaining why the real third way position is seizing all oil companies' assets. That's what I would do if I ran for office. I would explain that it's a new form of a public-private partnership while I'm lining people up against the wall.
Back to the question of party, it's really not totally clear to me. I am more skeptical than some of my more like orthodox Trotskyist comrades in DSA on the question of the party, right? Because I think, these are folks who think we need a socialist party. We need a socialist party that is also a labor party, that is not this bizarre cross-class alliance that we have right now in the Democratic Party of workers and bosses, labor and capital. But like every time we've seen a socialist party succeed at taking power, they have ultimately failed. Like, look at what happened with Syriza in Greece. Like, everything is just so overdetermined by the wider political economic climate. That said, I would still prefer.
Syriza uniquely did not have the ability in their position to do much more than they
exactly.
did. I mean,
They
but Jeremy Corbyn has more room to move. Bernie Sanders would have more room to move.
Well, we'll see, but it hasn't worked yet. But to be fair, nothing has worked yet, so I can't totally write it off. But that said, all of that said, I would still rather have a socialist party in the U.S. than the Democratic Party that we have now.
Here's a good counterpoint to that. A big reason why these left electoral movements have failed is precisely because they, even getting elected on a national level in a place like Greece or Venezuela, doesn't give you the actual levers of power that you need to make fundamental changes to society. And an interesting news story for the past week is I believe the British Royal Bank, which has control over Venezuela's gold reserves, is being urged to assign that over, the country's wealth, to this insurrectionary who's calling himself president.
They are.
And they are doing that.
Do that, yeah.
If you're the president of the United States and you're picking the chairman of the Federal Reserve, you're picking the head of the World Bank and the head of the IMF, I think you have a bit more power at that point.
Yeah.
Also,
Yeah, I mean, the
especially with an
logistically
emergency
in the United
order.
States, armed revolution is
idea
more
is
likely than
that
an
is the
actual
counterpoint to what I just said, I
Right.
guess,
Yeah.
which is that, a lot of the time it's U.S. intervention that is the primary
Right.
factor in killing these movements. But we'll see.